Welcome to VSOW.
Today we are embarking on a deep dive into the true operational reality of modern success.
And we're going to be challenging one of the most persistent, deeply held beliefs in our society, the ideal of the meritocracy.
Exactly, that whole concept we were all kind of raised on.
Right, the idea that if you put in the effort, you work hard, you get the degree,
Yeah.
you will be rewarded in kind.
But our sources today, they suggest that this vision has, well, it's largely been replaced by something far more rigid and, frankly, exclusionary.
Something we're calling the inheritocracy.
That's the word. And this isn't just about the top 1% anymore. That's what's so important to understand. It's a systemic reality where an individual's opportunities, their social mobility.
Even their ability to secure basic adult milestones.
Exactly, like housing or retirement. All of it is increasingly determined by the single biggest factor they have, virtually no control over.
And that is the wealth and assets of their parents and their extended family.
The source material we've gathered paints this picture. I mean, it does so vividly. It shows us how this inheritocracy operates at both ends of the economic spectrum.
So first, we have some really compelling sociological and economic analyses.
And these detail the massive shift into this inheritocracy. They focus on the indispensable day-to-day role of the so-called bank of mom and dad, or BOMAD.
And its profound impact on the middle and aspiring classes.
Then we're going to pivot dramatically from those middle-class necessities to the high-stakes, hyper-complex world of the ultra-wealthy.
And for that, we'll be analyzing a detailed U.S. Senate committee report. It exposes the mechanisms, the incredibly complex high-level tax avoidance schemes.
The ones used to shield, amplify, and transfer dynastic fortunes for generations, often completely tax-free.
And finally, we will weigh some contrasting economic views. We'll look at the structural critiques of Thomas Piketty's thesis on perpetual capital accumulation.
And we'll critically examine the philosophical foundations of meritocracy itself.
Yeah.
Asking, is the ideal even achievable in the first place?
Okay, let's unpack this. Our core mission for you, the listener, is to really understand why, in a society with higher education rates and more information than ever before, why the message that hard work guarantees economic security seems to have completely stalled out for an entire generation.
What's so fascinating here is that we're really looking at two separate but related tracks of wealth transfer.
Right.
At the middle class level, you have this necessary family support. It acts as a safety net, a vital springboard. It's essentially filling huge economic gaps left by dysfunctional housing markets and a retracting state.
And this is often driven by parental love, by necessity.
Absolutely. But then, simultaneously at the elite level, you have highly sophisticated legal engineering. It's dedicated to maximum wealth preservation and transfer.
So both dynamics, coming from very different places, ultimately lead to the same outcome.
Profound societal shifts and entrenched inequality that it completely undermines the meritocratic ideal.
So let's start with that central contradiction. The defining characteristic of the 21st century is this definitive shift from meritocracy, the idea that effort and hard work dictate success, to this system we call the inheritocracy.
The sheer scale of inherited wealth today is it's staggering. And it really underscores this new reality.
So what are the numbers?
Globally, people are expected to inherit a phenomenal $6 trillion this year alone.
$6 trillion.
$6 trillion. And that figure is crucial because it represents 10% of global GDP.
Wow.
To put that in historical context, that percentage is double the average that inherited wealth represented throughout the entire 20th century. So we're fundamentally returning to a dynamic where capital accumulation through inheritance plays a dominant structural role.
And that reality, as we mentioned, it just flies directly in the face of the narrative that fueled the post-war boom, the one that inspired generations.
The old work hard, get a degree, and you will be rewarded promise.
Exactly. The profound frustration we see among younger generations is so pronounced precisely because they feel like they followed the rules, but the reward never materialized.
And the economic backdrop makes this almost inevitable. If you consider the post-2008 landscape, wage growth in many developed economies, like the UK, has been the slowest in over a century.
A century, while at the same time,
asset prices, and crucially housing, have soared by nearly 70% in the last decade alone.
So the value of a degree has paradoxically gone down as the price has gone up.
It's a complete disconnect. Your maximum effort level no longer aligns with your financial outcome.
To bring this out of the abstract, to make it, painfully relatable, we should look at how these statistics translate into a life story. Let's talk about the experience of someone we'll call Sarah.
Right. Sarah is the ideal learner. She's
Hmm.
the person society told you will succeed.
She did everything right. Aced her exams, earned her degree, built a successful career, juggles childcare, pays her taxes diligently.
All of it. Yet her ability to achieve the basic milestones of adulthood, owning a home, affording decent family holidays, securing a viable retirement, it's just impossible.
Impossible without significant parental financial intervention.
And the sources detail the nature of this assistance. It isn't just a small loan here or there. It's the kind of assistance that fundamentally shifts her life trajectory.
So her parents paid her university fees and tuition up front.
Right. Which, in one 5-minute transaction, saved her from the decade-long, often debilitating burden of student loan debt.
And then came the big one, the house deposit.
The major hurdle. Her parents intervened and turned what Sarah calculated would have been a 10-year savings plan of just stringent budgeting.
Into a 5-minute bank transfer.
A 5-minute bank transfer. And the support continues daily. Crucially, they assist with the massive costs of childcare.
Without that, her entire salary, the reward for all that effort, would just disappear into nursery fees.
It would. So she recognizes she's one of the lucky ones. She has that safety net. But she also can't escape this feeling that her life is an impossibly difficult balancing act.
And that her entire fate has become a lottery of birth.
This is where we hit a really uncomfortable but a critical sociological point.
Which is the psychological justification required for a person to accept and live with this kind of unearned privilege.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Why are we, as beneficiaries of this kind of opportunity, so reluctant to be honest about where it really comes from?
The fact that it's often not about our personal effort, but about family wealth.
Because it's fundamentally difficult for the human ego to reconcile the idea of being a successful, capable, self-made individual with the reality of having a massive, unearned financial head start.
So you reframe it.
You reframe it. Beneficiaries of the Bank of Mom and Dad often frame that financial support not as their own privilege, but as evidence of their parents' hard work and upward mobility. They cling to a narrative of merit, even if the actual money came from a pure asset lottery, like housing appreciation.
That's the classic protective story, isn't it? I mean, we saw one speaker in the sources who initially recounted this heartwarming, working-class, done-good tale, emphasizing that their dad was just a painter and decorator. It's a compelling story. But the true source of their family's wealth and their own opportunities?
It wasn't that. It was their parents' shrewd decision to invest and hold on to several London properties in the 1980s.
So by 2008, when the financial crisis hit, those parents had become what the speaker called paper millionaires.
Exactly. The ultimate opportunity was due to asset appreciation and housing deregulation, not the child's career success.
This raises an important question, and critical thinking is essential here. Why does this concept of being self-made persist with such, religious fervor when all the data suggests the opposite?
We see evidence of this desperation to claim merit everywhere. One really remarkable study found that nearly half, 47% of middle-class professionals with degrees actually claim to be working class.
47%. That's almost 1 in 2 people actively, misidentifying their class origin. Why? Why are they doing that?
They're doing it to justify their current position. They often cite their grandparents or great-grandparents who were genuinely working class to essentially prove that they earned their lives through effort rather than benefiting from heritage.
So they need to believe that social mobility is still possible through sheer merit alone.
Because acknowledging the lottery of birth undermines the entire basis of their personal narrative. It's an act of psychological self-preservation.
Okay, let's move into section 2. Looking at the practical engine of this inheritocracy, the Bank of Mom and Dad. We've established that BOMAD is far broader than just the top 1% or a quick house deposit.
Oh, absolutely. BOMAD is comprehensive, and it defines the new milestone culture. It includes, the friend who suddenly acquires a home deposit despite constantly complaining about being broke.
Right, or the parents who let their children stay at home rent-free for years while they're saving for a flat.
And crucially, it's the ongoing subsidy of low-wage professions, the so-called passion jobs, or covering immense financial costs like nursery or university fees.
We are even seeing the Bank of Grandma and Granddad stepping in now.
We are, and it's driving an economic wedge between the youngest cohorts, generations Alpha and Z, based purely on which grandparents happen to hold assets.
We have to emphasize the sheer scale of this. This isn't just small transfers. BOMAT is now functionally one of the country's biggest mortgage lenders.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about over £8 billion in annual financial support provided directly by parents to their children.
And its impact runs deeper than just cash, doesn't it?
It does. The dynamic has made parents the gatekeepers to their children's adulthood. They fundamentally determine which traditional life milestones, buying property, getting married, having children, are even achievable and when.
There was a term for this in the source material, a dynamic called good parents, poor citizens.
Yes, that was from the economist James Sefton. The idea that the family has been forced to step up because the state has retracted key support services and the market has become completely dysfunctional for young earners.
What's also fascinating is the shift in the inequality dynamic itself. David Willits, who famously wrote about the conflict between boomers and millennials.
He now admits the focus has changed.
Right. The debate is no longer simply intergenerational unfairness, boomers versus millennials.
Instead, it has morphed into intense intergenerational unfairness. It is now wealthy millennials versus struggling millennials. This new dependency culture within the family is actively halting social mobility for anyone without parental assets.
And certain factors amplify that advantage considerably, creating clear winners and losers.
We're seeing a stratification based on family structure and geography. Those whose parents are together, those living in economic heartlands like the Southeast, being an only child, all of these things hold an advantage.
But the biggest winners are those whose parents are able to gift an early inheritance.
Yes.
Why does the timing of that gift matter so much?
Well, it's a race against the clock in an aging society. This early gifting is doubly advantageous because it avoids the potential threat of later social care costs. As people live longer, the cost of care can potentially gobble up all of a parent's housing wealth. This means those who waited for an inheritance might get nothing, while those who received an early transfer get to keep their advantage.
This dependency and division, it creates real stress and resentment. The sources provided some vivid anecdotes of the emotional toll the system takes. Let's look at Greg, 31, a classic meritocrat raised in a single-parent household who managed to achieve great things despite the odds.
Greg went to a top London university, and to make ends meet, he tutored wealthy kids on the side. And he found this work profoundly depressing. Demoralizing, even.
He saw these students who literally had everything on a plate, effortless wealth, connections, stability, while he was constantly scrimping and calculating his finances.
He felt like the underclass looking in on a privileged world. But what really struck him was the irony of it all.
Which was?
He was so angry and resentful about other people's effortless wealth that he went to counseling. And he realized that the £100 tuition fee paid by his wealthy student was literally paying for his therapist. His anger was being funded by the very privilege he resented.
That is the ultimate encapsulation of the system's cruelty. And we also see how this reliance shapes future planning.
Yeah.
Consider Emma, 31, a mother of three struggling desperately on the housing ladder.
Right. She's relying on what the source describes as a morbid expectation.
Morbid how?
She's convinced her financial problems will just disappear in about 10 years. When her and her husband's parents, who are in their 70s, pass away, their combined inheritances, she believes, will just materialize and solve everything.
So it's not a long-term plan based on her earnings. It's a dependency strategy based on her parents' mortality.
Exactly. And this growing reliance is demonstrably altering social patterns. Interclass relationships have declined.
A study by the Resolution Foundation concluded that people tend to couple up with those who have similar inheritance expectations to their own.
It suggests the modern dating landscape is taking on this unsettling sort of Jane Austen-esque quality, where assessing a partner's family assets is becoming inseparable from the romance.
We should also note that this family-centric economic model isn't universal in how it's presented.
No, globally there are different cultural expectations. In places like Mumbai, the story of Alina revealed that parental support is far less taboo than it is in the UK or the US, where it's often unspoken and shamefully hidden.
And what's the crucial difference in the social contract there?
The support is often conditioned on a clear cultural expectation of reciprocation. Help is given now, but the child is implicitly sometimes explicitly, expected to look after the parents in their old age.
So it's a profound dynamic where inheritance stories are tightly bound to familial bonds and reciprocal obligation.
Not just a gift with no strings attached. And some commentators suggest the West is potentially becoming more Asian in its economically bound family ties, where financial support and care become inseparable.
And the complexity of that care in an aging one-child society is highlighted by China's 421 phenomenon.
The 421, 4 grandparents and 2 parents, all potentially supported by just one millennial child. It illustrates the immense social and economic weight that an inheritocracy places on a single generation.
Okay, we must now pivot completely. If the first two sections showed us the bank of mom and dad operating out of love, necessity, and housing assets,
This next section is about pure, sophisticated legal strategy.
we are moving to the realm of the ultra-wealthy, analyzing how the most successful dynastic fortunes are shielded.
And this transition is critical because it moves from filling gaps in the market to actively subverting the system. We're now looking at that U.S. Senate Committee on Finance report.
The estate tax, historically, was designed to narrow the wealth gap and prevent the perpetual buildup of dynastic wealth.
Right. Bill Gates Sr. famously viewed the estate tax as an economic opportunity recycling program. Money taken out of generational transfer and put back into the public system.
Vital for a healthy democracy.
Precisely. But for sophisticated tax planners, this 40% tax rate, which is applied to estates over the $10.98 million exemption per couple, is just an inconvenience to be legally avoided.
And the goal of these schemes is simple.
It's to remove the assets and critically remove all future appreciation of those assets from transfer taxation. They often combine multiple complex strategies for maximum avoidance across generations.
The Senate report introduces us to the code words for billion-dollar tax dodge.
Yeah.
GRATs, IDGTs, crummy trusts, and dynasty trusts.
Let's start with a fundamental principle they all exploit, the difference between gift tax and estate tax.
Okay, so this is the foundation. It exploits the distinction between the gift tax being tax-exclusive and the estate tax being tax-inclusive.
Yes.
Wait, what does tax-exclusive versus tax-inclusive mean in practice?
It's how the tax is calculated. When you make a gift during your life, the gift tax is paid out of separate assets. It's exclusive of the gift itself.
Oh.
But when the tax is paid after death, the estate tax is paid out of the estate itself, effectively reducing what's inherited. It's inclusive of the estate.
So you pay tax on the tax.
Exactly. The source provides a brilliant illustration in example 10. If a parent wants to transfer $10 million post-tax to a child,
Right.
transferring it via gift during life costs $14 million in total. $10 million for the gift, $4 million for the tax. But if they wait until death, they have to set aside $16.67 million from their assets to make sure $10 million is left after the 40% tax.
So by transferring during life, the parent avoids $2.67 million in taxes alone. That's the core incentive.
That's it. And they leverage the power of the annual gift tax exclusion, which allows an individual to exclude the first $14,000 of gifts per person each year.
Which doesn't sound like much for a billionaire, but applied over time.
It multiplies rapidly. Example 3 demonstrates that a couple making successive $28,000 transfers for 2 children from 2017 until 2070 could reduce their gross estate by a combined $5.8 million compared to waiting until death.
Just from that one small annual exclusion.
It's a mechanism for continuous tax-free erosion of the taxable estate.
Okay, now we move to the next layered complexity. Grantor trusts. Let's tackle the grantor retained annuity trusts, or GRATs. These sound complicated, but the principle relies on assumptions, right?
Yes, GRATs are a form of split interest trust. The grantor retains a fixed periodic payment, an annuity, for a set term. But the genius of the GRAT is that the gift value is based on IRS actuarial tables, which often assume a very modest, below-market rate of return, historically sometimes as low as 2.2%.
So the IRS is essentially lowballing the future value of the asset.
Exactly, and the ultimate weapon here is the zeroed-out GRAT. The grantor structures their fixed annuity payment to exactly equal the fair market value of the assets transferred, but based on the IRS's low assumed rate.
So because the grantor is theoretically taking back the entire value in payments, the value of the gift for tax purposes is zero.
It's deemed to be zero. So they're transferring millions of dollars worth of stock into a trust, but telling the tax man it's worth nothing.
And if the assets inside the trust then appreciate above that modest IRS rate.
That excess growth, the spread, passes entirely tax-free to the heir. It uses the government's own conservative assumption against them.
Let's look at the numbers. Example 4 is dramatic. A $10 million investment rolled through 3 successive 2-year zeroed-out DRIATs, with assets appreciating at a real 10.7%.
The parent succeeded in transferring $5.43 million tax-free to the child.
Without using any of their lifetime exemption. That's a staggering amount of tax-free wealth transfer created purely through legal paperwork.
The next level of complexity involves the intentionally defective grantor trusts, or IDGTs. The defect here is the key to the entire operation. It's a deliberate misalignment between two different sets of tax rules.
A misalignment. That sounds like telling 2 different government agencies 2 different things about the same asset.
That's the perfect analogy. For wealth transfer tax purposes, gift, or estate tax, the transfer is a completed gift, locking in the low initial value. But for income tax purposes, the grantor retains enough control, the defect, that they are still treated as the owner.
Meaning the grantor pays the income tax on the trust's earnings out of their personal income.
Precisely. They're essentially making a continuous untaxed gift to the trust every single year. This lets the trust assets grow completely income tax-free for the beneficiary.
And the most aggressive use of the IDGT is the installment sale.
Yes. This involves the grantor selling assets, often highly appreciating stock, to the IDGT in exchange for a promissory note. The interest rate on this note is based on the low federal midterm rate, which is often even lower than the rate for DRATs.
The Senate Committee's Example 5 demonstrates the sheer scale of the tax savings here. A couple transfers $10.98 million in cash.
Using their lifetime exemption.
And then sells $8 million in appreciating stock to the IDGT for a note. The stock then appreciates to $14 million.
By combining these moves, the couple successfully transfers over $16 million total free of transfer tax. The $8 million stock transfer is effectively treated as a $0 gift, and all the appreciation passed tax-free.
Next up, we have irrevocable life insurance trusts, or ILITs, often combined with crummy trusts. The ILIT is simple. Shift the life insurance policy ownership to the trust to avoid estate tax on the death benefit.
But the policy needs annual premiums. How do you fund those tax-free without triggering gift tax every year?
That's where the crummy power comes in.
A legal maneuver named after the court case that upheld it. Normally, contributions to a trust are future interests, which don't qualify for the annual $14,000 exclusion.
Right.
The crummy power grants the beneficiary a lapsing short-term right, say 30 days, to actually withdraw the cash contribution.
So they give the beneficiary the right to take the cash, but only for a brief window.
Yes. This temporary right legally converts the transfer into a present interest, which qualifies it for the exclusion. The beneficiary, of course, rarely exercises the right.
That is pure legal genius. What's the payoff?
Example 6 shows the staggering result. A couple funds annual premiums of $56,000 using crummy powers. When the insured parent dies, the massive $10 million death benefit is paid out to the children entirely free of gift, estate, and income tax.
And this practice is getting more aggressive now.
It is. Major institutions like J.P. Chase and Goldman Sachs are marketing private placement insurance policies invested in hedge funds called insurance-dedicated funds. They hold at least $15 billion in sheltered investments.
We also need to touch on improper valuation discounts, artificially reducing the taxable value of closely held businesses.
This is a way of manufacturing a discount out of thin air. You place assets into a family partnership and then claim 2 key discounts when transferring minority interests: lack of marketability and lack of control.
So even though the family collectively controls the whole business, the taxable value is drastically lowered.
Exactly. And the numbers are significant. Example 7 shows that by transferring a 60% stake in a $100 million business in 4 separate 15% transfers, claiming a combined 30% discount, the parent reduces the taxable value from $60 million to $42 million.
Avoiding $7.2 million in gift tax.
All achieved simply by claiming the asset is less marketable than it really is.
Finally, we arrive at the ultimate long-term wealth shield: dynasty trusts.
These trusts combine the generation skipping transfer tax, or GSTT, exemption with a legal adjustment in certain states: the repeal of the rule against perpetuities, or RAP.
The GSTT is a backup tax designed to hit transfers that skip a generation to prevent indefinite tax avoidance. But these trusts circumvent even that.
They do. By using the high GSTT exemption amount and establishing the trust in a non-RAP state, where the trust can literally last forever, the wealth is permanently shielded. The initial transfer is locked in, and none of the appreciation for all future generations is ever subject to transfer tax.
And example 9 puts this into perspective. A couple transfers $10.98 million to a trust in a non-RIP state.
If those assets appreciate at a modest 5% annually, that trust will grow to a staggering $426.4 million in 75 years.
Spanning 3 generations.
With none of that massive appreciation ever being subject to gift, estate, or GST taxes. It is a legally engineered mechanism for creating permanent, perpetual, dynastic wealth.
Having explored how wealth is transferred and preserved at both the middle class and the ultra-elite level, let's zoom out. Let's look at the economic and philosophical ideas that try to explain or critique this system. We start with the theory of dynastic dominance from the economist Thomas Piketty.
Piketty's central claim, from his work Capital in the 21st century, is driven by a simple equation. When R, the rate of return on capital, is greater than G, the economic growth rate, it becomes almost inevitable that inherited wealth will dominate wealth amassed from a lifetime's labor.
Which implies we're destined for a permanent plutocracy where dynastic wealth inevitably dominates. It's a deeply unsettling idea.
It is. But there's a very strong rebuttal to this, particularly for American wealth dynamics, provided by the Tax Foundation's analysis of the Forbes 400 list.
And what does that analysis show?
It hinges on the idea that wealth is far more fleeting than Piketty implies. If his RG thesis were absolute, the rich would just stay rich and get richer. But the data shows high turnover. Of the original 1987 Forbes 400 list, 327 people dropped off by 2013.
That's a massive drop-off. It suggests the uncontrolled spiral might not be as universal as Piketty claims. How did the actual returns stack up for those who stayed on the list?
They were surprisingly unspectacular. The average annual real rate of return for the 1987 Forbes 400 was only 2.4% optimistically, or possibly as low as 0.2%.
Which is roughly equal to, or even lower than, the average return for the entire global population.
Exactly. It directly contradicts the notion that simply being super rich grants you privileged high returns. You still have to be good at investment.
So, if inheritance isn't the guaranteed wealth multiplier that Piketty feared, what is generating the current crop of massive fortunes?
The role of entrepreneurship is rising dramatically. The share of individuals on the Forbes 400 who are first-generation entrepreneurs rose from 40% in 1982 to a commanding 69% in 2011.
And correspondingly, the share who grew up wealthy fell from 60% to 32%.
It suggests that American wealth today is generated more by scalable entrepreneurial skill than by passive inheritance.
So how do we reconcile this? We've just spent 2 sections showing that family wealth is utterly decisive for the middle class, yet the most massive fortunes at the very top seem to be generated by self-made entrepreneurs. How do we hold both of those realities at the same time?
We hold them by recognizing the difference in scale and legal engineering. While inheritance provides the necessary springboard for middle-class life, a house, a debt-free education, the truly dynastic fortunes of old relied on the legal schemes we just discussed to survive.
So new wealth is created and then immediately protected by the old structures.
Exactly. New wealth is created by incredible high-risk, high-return entrepreneurship, but once created, it's immediately shielded by the same complex legal structures to ensure its longevity.
That distinction is key. Okay, now let's move beyond the economic debate and tackle the philosophical justification for this system. This brings us to the critique of meritocracy itself, led by thinkers like Michael Sandel.
Sandel argues that even if we could perfectly implement a meritocracy, a system where effort equals reward, the ideal itself is inherently flawed and potentially dangerous to social harmony.
Okay, the first flaw he points out is the incompatibility with freedom. Unpack that for us.
A true meritocracy is fundamentally incompatible with the freedom to dispose of one's private property and inheritance.
Why?
As long as parents are free to gift resources, whether that's money, access to networks, quality schooling, or even just a stable home environment, that resource is not earned by the child. It breaks the system. Any attempt to fix this impinges on a deep-seated human freedom.
So even if the government eliminated all tax avoidance tomorrow, the fact that one parent can afford private school and another can't already breaks the meritocratic ideal.
Absolutely. And the second major flaw is the illusion of complete individual control and the role of luck. Meritocracy assumes success is solely the result of individual merit, overlooking the massive role of luck, genetics, and environment.
If talent is luck, then rewarding talent is simply rewarding luck.
Precisely. Talent, high intelligence, physical ability, good health is often the culmination of ancestors' decisions or just sheer chance. Why should someone receive high social reward for being born with the right genetics?
And this leads to the third critical flaw, the subjective nature of merit. It's always defined by those already in power.
Hmm. We constantly confuse market value with moral value. Society needs capable surgeons, their merit is clear. But is the individual making millions from niche videos inherently more morally meritorious than an essential warehouse worker on minimum wage?
The market clearly says yes, but that doesn't make it morally true.
Meritocracy pretends that market value is a fair reflection of moral desert.
And the danger of this myth, even when partially achieved, is profound for society.
It's destructive. The ideal of meritocracy fosters arrogance and entitlement in the winners who feel inherently superior, and it generates deep humiliation and shame in the losers.
So the millions who try hard and fail to rise, they internalize that failure. They believe it's my fault rather than recognizing the structural issues we've just discussed. So what does this all mean? We've traced the system from the necessary interventions of the bank of mom and dad to the aggressive legal engineering that shields billions across centuries. The data shows the system is heavily rigged to protect and amplify wealth.
The central tension is unavoidable. While society absolutely needs merit, we need competent surgeons and reliable engineers, the relentless, romantic pursuit of a perfect meritocracy is doomed to fail because it is incompatible with freedom and ignores luck.
And worse, the myth of meritocracy, rather than driving mobility, might actually be worsening social division by justifying systemic inequality as individual failure.
That's the core of it.
We've explored the profound tension between the aspirations of a meritocratic society and the stark reality of the inheritocracy. Family wealth, whether delivered through essential parental support via the BOMAD or through complex legal engineering like dynasty trusts, is increasingly the decisive structural factor in modern opportunity.
We've established that the economic system is heavily wired to transfer and protect wealth across generations. And this forces us as a society to confront the fact that our deeply cherished belief in the self-made individual often masks the structural advantages inherent in the system.
The evidence is clear. The concept of the inheritocracy forces a profound internal rationalization for all of us. We have to choose between believing we live in a rigged system or believing we simply didn't try hard enough.
Yet the data strongly suggests we must recognize the structural forces at play. We leave you with this final provocative thought, building on that philosophical challenge we discussed. If the ability to succeed is based not just on effort, but on the sheer luck of birth, the genetic, circumstantial, or educational inheritance from our ancestors, how should a compassionate society balance rewarding effort, which is necessary, while ensuring against the misfortune of being born into disadvantage?
Should society strive instead for great outcomes for those who are completely unremarkable instead of seeking to perfectly reward only the talented?
It's a question worth thinking about.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe, like, and comment on our content. Your support helps us continue to unpack these crucial issues.
Thank you for listening to VSOW.